Councillor Peter Carlill, Cavlin Farsley Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Kevin Ritchie, Bramley and Stanley Ward.
Good morning, Mahaley France Mia, Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Good morning, Sharon Burt, Middleton Park Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Taylor, Chapel Allerton Ward.
Good morning, Governor Almus from the Beeston and Albeck Ward, and may I also give apologies for Councillor Samford, who has COVID and couldn't get in touch with people, so he sent me a message. Thank you.
Good morning, Susanna Benton, Head of Electoral Services.
Good morning, everyone. John Mulcahy, Chief Officer, Elections and Regulatory.
Holly Kirk, Chief Officer for Sustainable Energy and Air Quality, and standing in for Neil for the contact centre report today. Thanks.
Is that it? Yeah. Morning, everybody. Councillor Deborah Cooper and the Exec Board Member for Resources and Community Safety.
Morning, everybody. Billy Flynn, Councillor Bradley Wharfdale Ward.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Linda Richards from Wetherby Ward, standing in for Sam Firth.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Diane Chapman for Rothwell Ward.
Morning, Becky Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. Go through the usual items at the start of the meeting. Over to Becky.
Item 1, there are no appeals against refusals of inspection documents. Item 2, there are no items excluded from the public domain. Item 3, there are no late items. Item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask members to disclose any interests in accordance with Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct? I will take silence as none. We've had apologies from Councillor Caroline Gruen. Councillor Eileen Taylor is attending as a substitute. Councillor Firth has also sent apologies and Councillor Richards is attending as a substitute. We've had apologies from Councillor James Lewis with regard to item 8 and also Neil Evans. Moving on to the minutes. Minute 21, members may wish to note that the 100% digital report was circulated via email on the 25th of July, as was the further information about the social housing picker. The graph from the medium-term financial report in October 2021 was also recirculated on the 26th of July. There are 2 items of information still outstanding in reference to minute 22, and I'm following these up on behalf of the board.
Thank you, Becky. Any questions on the minutes or points of accuracy on the minutes? No, great. Okay, let's move on to item 7. So item 7 is the Electoral Services update, and I'll hand over to John. You can assume we've read the report, but if there's anything in particular you want to draw out, please do so.
Many thanks, Chair. Can I introduce members of the committee to Susanna Benton, the Head of Electoral Services here, who will provide a brief summary of the report for members for anything that she wishes to draw their particular attention to, and then we'll be happy to answer any question members have.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chair. So I was asked to put a report together that followed on from a similar one that we brought to scrutiny about 12 months ago now, focusing on voter behaviour and in particular around postal voting. We looked at ways to reduce the number of rejected postal ballots at the elections in May, which came as a result of some comments from scrutiny about the number that were rejected in May 2021. We improved the clarity of the pack that electors receive, and we found that we had less contact about how to complete the postal voting statement that comes with the ballot paper, so that was a positive move. We also added in a secondary check to those that were to be rejected at the postal vote opening. So On weekends in between and in the week of the election, we revisited all the packs that the staff at Postal Vote Opening had been minded to reject, and went through those again and looked at other areas where we could. We looked at other documents we had. If things were faint and unreadable, we enhanced the images and things to try and get as much through as possible. And we're pleased to say that that brought the number of packs reduced from 3.22% in 2021 to 2.11% in 2022. This worked out at an average of 78 per ward rejected, in comparison with 143 per ward in the previous year. Just in terms of voter behaviour, we're still very much in the situation that people are voting more by post than they are in person. So 62% of electors in May voted by postal vote, whereas 38% of those who voted in person. Moving on to the Parliamentary boundary review, we were asked to just comment on this. At the moment, the Boundary Commission for England are considering representations that have been made during a consultation stage to their initial proposals, and they are expected to publish their final proposals by the 1st of July 2023. That's all from me, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions from members? Yep, Councillor Carlyle.
Thanks, Chair. It's less on the details that are in the report, but one of the problems I remember from last year, so we've got a very high postal vote number in my ward, 7,000 and something at the last election, I think. Obviously, that means the majority of the vast majority of votes are postal votes. There were a number of people who had difficulties receiving their postal vote that we got in. And I think when it came close to the deadline, if I remember correctly, the information given was to come to the city centre and pick up a postal vote. Is there anything we can do around that? Because obviously for people, the people that really need to vote by post are those who may find getting to their polling station difficult, let alone getting to Leeds city centre.
Thanks, Councillor. Unfortunately, the law is that the elector is required to come and collect their replacement pack. In certain circumstances, we do allow a bit of discretion. So what we will do is say, is there somebody that can come and collect it? It should be a personal collection. So we say, could you send somebody with your identification and a letter from yourself to say that they are they're able to collect the pack on your behalf. If they can't send anybody down, then in extreme circumstances, we will send a representative of the returning officer out to somebody. But because it's the law for them to come in and collect, we do take care that in most circumstances we follow that process.
Thanks. That's useful to know. So just to clarify on that law in specifics, does that require them to come into the central elections office? There's no way they could pick one up from a polling station or similar on the day?
There's no facility for them to be able to pick up from a polling station. But like I say, in circumstances where there's no other option, we would not leave it so that they couldn't have their replacement pack. We would get something to them. Usually me on the night before the election going around and dropping them off and collecting them in and bringing them back in. But yes, we'll definitely make sure that people get them if they can't get in.
Thank you. And your election office, historically, it's been in the town hall. It's not necessarily as accessible as perhaps it could be. Is there any way we could look at finding a more accessible space for people to collect them? I'm just following up on Councillor Carlyle's point.
So at the moment we are based in the Civic Hall, so this is where they come to. We're looking at accommodation at the moment. That's a work in progress, so there may be development there, but I'm not aware of anything at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, going to bring in Councillor Almas next.
Thank you, Chair. May I acknowledge the fact just been mentioned in terms of missing the packs and so on. It was really helpful that 5 of the residents from my ward who complained about it, and then one obviously was complaining but didn't really know what the issue was, but all 5 of them actually received the pack, and it was actually delivered to their house, so they were really pleased about that. One of the issues that we've got on the polling stations is people who forget to post their postal vote, and not a lot of them actually know what to do with it. So they think, it's the most wasted post or whatever. wasted vote. But I mean, is there any specification in the letters that you send out that they can actually take the letter to any of the polling stations, because that they can just work as a post office? And also, it's not clear whether they can leave those postal votes at any of the polling stations, or they have to go to their own polling station. And the other query I've got is with regards to, it's really welcome the fact that the average number of postal votes rejected in the ward have gone down significantly, almost by 50%. But obviously there must be some wards where it will certainly be more than 78. This is just an average. So what are you doing in terms of addressing that to those particular wards where the number is quite high? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll answer your second question first. In some of the wards where the rejection rates are higher, it tends to be where there's quite a few people within the same household voting by post, and they mix up their documents. We have tried to make this clearer in the instructions to make sure that people realise that what they receive in their pack is their postal vote, and they can't actually use each other's documents, but it does happen. We do write to those electors after the election to let them know that their pack's been rejected and why it's been rejected, so hopefully that will encourage them to be more careful in future. But that is the main reason for higher rejection rates that we find in some of the higher percentage wards. And your other question, the information about handing in at polling stations is on every postal vote pack. I will have a look at that and see how clear that is. I know some of the wording statutory, but I'm sure we can add something else in there if you feel that it's not clear enough for them. In terms of which postal polling stations they're able to hand in at, it depends on the type of election. So if you've got a ward election, they can hand into any election in that ward. If there's also a parliamentary election going on the same day, so a constituency, then the constituency becomes the area they can hand into. So it does differ, but it does explain that on the pack. But I will have a look at making that clearer, Councillor, if I can.
Okay, Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested that obviously you quoted as saying 78 average per ward. Yeah. Is the information available for the particular ward numbers?
Yeah, page 21 of your pack.
Yeah, there is that level of detail in the appendix, Councillor.
Okay, Councillor Burke.
Thank you. I know in the report you actually mentioned that you are reviewing the number of polling stations and locations, so perhaps this question's a little premature, but do you have a feeling, because obviously as the numbers go down, you would require less capacity, wouldn't you? Which will inevitably have a knock-on effect for people who live in proximity of the polling station that potentially is going to disappear. Do you have a feeling or a steer already about how many you would be perhaps looking to reduce in each ward? That's a big question. It's a bit hypothetical as well, isn't it?
No, it's a good question. Thank you. I actually think we're in a pretty good position in terms of polling stations. We were forced really to do a lot of work on them with COVID and having to do away with portable buildings. So we already saw a reduction of around, I think, 25 across the city. I don't anticipate it will go down very much more, if at all. We're very aware that the taking away polling stations does make it more difficult for people to get to the stations. So I think in reality what it will mean is that we'll have smaller polling stations. We might be able to use some smaller buildings. We'll have less staff in them, but they will still be there for the electors to go to if that's how they wish to vote.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you for the report. It's very interesting to see how the shift in voter patterns have gone recently. The question I have, it's not really in the report, but I just wondered what provision are there for people with visual impairments, and also people who are in care settings in terms of, you know, getting them signed up for votes and support in voting. So that's one area. And the other area, because it's in the appendix, I know there's not a lot we can do about it, but I just have to comment on the proposals for the electoral ward changes. And I just think there's ripping up Leeds, really, you know, and I know we'll have enough chance, and I did submit my response the last lot, but I just want to put that on record. I think it's appalling, really, what they're planning to do.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Yeah, I can't really comment on what the proposals are for the parliamentary boundary review because it is complete out of our hands. But I agree for us logistically to administer splitting some of the wards across with other authorities is quite tricky. I think we go from having one shared constituency to 3. So yeah, but it is what it is. I think they've had that consultation stage. So the next thing that they put out there will be what we're faced with, and we'll have to deal with that when it comes to it. In terms of visual impairments, do you mean for people that are completing postal votes or in the polling station, councillor?
Both, really.
Both.
But yeah.
Okay. Visual impairments. I think what the advice we'd give for that, if it was a postal vote, is to apply for a postal vote with a waiver so they didn't have to provide the signature, so that somebody could assist them in terms of putting their date of birth on the postal voting statement. And then at home, obviously, they may have something that can assist them, something of their own in terms of marking the ballot paper, that might some kind of magnifying device or other device so that they're able to complete that. There's no provision for any ballot papers in another format like Braille or anything like that, so we're not able to provide that. In the polling station, we've got a tactile device so that attaches to the ballot paper that does have Braille on it, so that they can at least be told the number 1 candidate is this person, number 2 candidate is this person, and then they'll be able to use that device and mark the vote accordingly. For the elections in May 2023, there will be more accessibility requirements on the returning officers. So there will be additional equipment and things like that in the polling station for voters. And also they will be encouraged a lot more to use their own devices and things to assist them to mark their vote, whatever their impairment is.
And also in care settings.
In care settings, I presume, everybody's offered a postal vote wherever they are registered. I presume the care staff in care homes would assist people to complete their postal voting parts as far as they can, obviously not encouraging them to vote in a particular way, but to assist them and show them how to direct them what they need to do, where they need to sign. Again, we do have a lot of electors in care settings that have got the waiver of the signature, so they're not having to do that part of the process.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just to come back then on, is that information communicated through sort of the third sector and charity organisations that support people with visual impairments, for example? And again, and just in terms of the care settings, I just wondered if there's something as a council we can do to encourage people and make them aware of what's there, because I think it's important that they have an opportunity to take part in the democratic process. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, councillor. And the new requirements of the Elections Act will see the council making more contact with care settings and people in all different scenarios to try and get the message to them that we will be able to provide more assistance and how they can access that assistance and what's available as well. So over the coming months, you will see more of that activity taking place and as well informing electors about the requirement to take ID to polling stations. So yeah, we will be doing a lot more of that work because the Elections Act is encouraging that.
Thanks, Chair. Just if I could add to what Susie's just said there, as some of you members will know, I do have a visual impairment myself, which is hereditary for my family. So I'm very familiar with the guidance that's issued to families when they're voting with visual impairments. The RNIB do send out in advance of all local and national elections information to households that they know that they have people registered with them that have visual impairments, reminding them of the facilities that are available at polling stations should they wish it, suggesting postal votes if they have difficulty with mobility, etc. So a lot of the third sector organisations that you refer to, Councillor, are well aware and already send out information in advance to help people with visual impairments as well. So I often found that was very helpful for my mother, who is practically blind with the same eye condition that I have at the moment, and other members of my family that are similarly affected as well. So just to reassure you that information is out there from the third sector as well as through the council.
Thank you very much for sharing that, John. That's really helpful. Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Councillor Ritchie already asked part of my question, but follow up from what you comments, the rejected postal votes is in houses that large amount of people live in. I'm trying to remember because I do postal vote. Are there, you think it's language barrier? Are there any, I can't remember if there's different languages comes in the envelope for the individuals.
No, there's no alternative language information provided in envelopes with postal votes. There's a statutory list of things that we can put in there, and that at the moment is not one of them. But we could look at making some information available in a different way as regards to that, councillor. So I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
I think that would be very important because there's quite a few languages spoken, so that's very important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Councillor Taylor. And there might be a way, for example, to put further information link in the pack, and that would be something you could add more information on. So thank you for that. Okay, I can't see anyone else who has indicated. So thank you. Councillor Cooper, do you want to comment?
Yeah, just at the end of the discussion, really, if I may, Chair, take this opportunity to thank John, Susanna and the teams for improving access to voters in Leeds and ensuring that more postal votes are counted in our elections as they have done, and you've seen the report. So please pass on our thanks, Susanna, to the team that you work with, doing a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Okay, thank you both. Okay, we're going to move on to item 8 now. So I think Tim and Andy are going to come to the table and take the seats at the other end. This item is about the corporate risk report and how the council manages its risk. Just give them a moment to sit down. Okay, so can you introduce yourselves before you start? And then also, just to be clear, we assume we've all read the report, but if you've got something in particular you want to draw out, you feel free to. Thank you.
Good morning, Tim Rollett from the Council's Intelligence and Policy Service, and we've got responsibility for the risk management of the Council.
Good morning, my name is Andy Dobman. I'm the Chief HR Officer for the Council. I'm here because in the corporate risk, there's quite a lot of people-related risks, so I thought it would be useful for me to attend. Thank you.
So I'll just provide a brief overview of this report. So this is our annual corporate risk report, and we submit it to Executive Board usually every July. The report outlines what the most significant risks facing the Council and the City are, and also provides information about how we manage those risks and also what more do we need to do about them. The risks are generally categorised into two main areas. The first are internal facing risks. So those are the things that impact on the Council, and that covers things like the budget, IT systems, and also, as we just mentioned, the workforce. But we also have external facing risks that face the City. And those are things like major flooding, and there's a risk called major incident in the City, which covers a wide range of things that could impact on people. It must be noted that since we went to Executive Board back in July, the risk landscape has changed further, and some of the risks, quite understandably, have increased in prominence. And it will come as no surprise to realise that some of the big issues facing not just Leeds City Council, but councils across the country include things like increased budgetary pressures. Inflation has put a lot of pressure on our budgets. We've seen the increasing costs of energy, which will impact on our energy bill. But also, along with other local authorities, there's a lot of staffing pressures as well, and it's becoming increasingly challenging to recruit and retain really good staff for the authority. So no surprise that since this report went to Exec Board, the prominence of those risks has increased. So I'll pause for a moment now and happy to answer your questions on the report.
Thank you very much. for that. Just to highlight to members that this is clearly the corporate risks. Each directorate has another set of risks, as it says in the report, and different scrutiny boards will monitor them. And yeah, thanks for highlighting inflation. I know that 43 members of the scrutiny boards have gone to some training on inflation specifically because it's going to be such a big issue for us. Has anyone got any questions that they want to raise on this report? I'll start with Councillor Burke.
Thank you. I'm not sure it's a question, it's more of an observation. I was looking at the corporate risk map, which is figure 1 in the pack, where it's broken down into categories. So one of the major risks is community cohesion, which is an extremely subjective term, isn't it? But I note with interest that a moderate risk is insufficient housing growth and insufficient school places. And I would argue that the lack of housing and school places have a huge impact on community cohesion. So I'm not sure if it strikes me that some of the headings have lots of, or should have lots of subheadings that sit under them because they can't be in isolation. But I'm not sure that insufficient housing growth is a moderate impact, because that would certainly impact significantly on community cohesion, in my opinion. Thank you.
Yes, happy to provide a bit more information on that. Many of these risks are interrelated. So if one risk increases in prominence, there's a knock-on impact to other risks. And we, as part of the background details of these risks, we include what the sources of those risks are, so we can map across and see what those links are. And obviously community cohesion is quite a broad term. It's quite linked to quite a lot of other risks. But we've got some good controls in place to manage that risk as outlined in the reports. And if we're on top of those controls and they work as intended, it tends to keep the risk score low.
Just to say, this is the normal time for fire alarm tests on a Monday morning. So we'll just pause the meeting until it turns off or until we have to leave. Okay, thank you very much.
There we go.
Back over to you.
That nearly catches me out every single week, but I could hear it coming, so I was able to pause there and not do my usual jump out of the seat like I normally do at 10:30 every Monday. So that's right. So in terms of the links to the housing, well, obviously we've got a good housing stock with lots of developments in the pipeline, and obviously that has an impact on community cohesion as well. And we've got some great plans around the housing, and we're delivering new housing schemes around that. So again, it is linked, but it's because we've got those plans in place and they're generally working as intended, that's why the housing risk is lower. But when people review the risks and sign them off, they're able to map across and see those links.
Can I just ask one other question, which perhaps is really obvious to everybody except me? Within community cohesion, would that include kind of policing, antisocial behaviour, level of disruption as well?
That's right, yes. And these risks also link across to our key performance indicators as well. And so we can see that, if things like hate incidents, etc., crime rates are rising, that could be an indicator that the risk is about to happen or could increase in prominence. So we tend to make that quite clear when we do risk training courses or we develop new risks. What are the links between them? And when we report these risks to the directorates, as Councillor Scopes mentioned earlier, each of these corporate risks go through the directorate management team along with their directorate level risks. The risks get reported at the same time as the performance indicators. So those management teams can see the full picture at the same time and say, oh, performance indicators are heading in the wrong direction here. Is that having an impact on the risk there? So there's that sort of joined up working that we've got there. So it allows members to sort of get, or managers to get that full picture.
Thank you. Just back on the housing point that Councillor Burke made. Last time I talked to a housing officer, there was around 5,500 people on band A for council houses. And I just think a lot of our residents would see that as really significant major issue. And certainly in my inbox, it's the biggest issue I get in terms of people really struggling for affordable quality houses. Obviously, council housing is one avenue for that. But I just think it is very high prominence in my mind. So I just want to echo what Councillor Burke had highlighted. Okay. Councillor Almas next.
Thank you. My question is around the climate change corporate risk assurance on page 43 of the pack. I mean, obviously, it's a journey with regards to having the carbon footprint from council operations to net zero by 2025 and carbon emissions to be reduced to net zero by 2030 for the city. I mean, obviously, you've just outlined a bit of activity to support climate mitigation adaptation for the next 12 months and so on. But along this journey, especially vis-a-vis the council footprint, because it's coming, it's quite imminent. So where are we at with regards to that? Thank you.
Claire, you've got Paula here, so
just as well I can. So we're on track, I think, to meet that 2025 target. We are looking at developing our own solar farms, and a lot of our own emissions are linked to how we buy our electricity. Gas is a much bigger challenge, how we get our buildings off gas, but we have, because we secured 25 million from the public sector decarbonisation scheme, we took about 40 of our buildings off gas last year. We got further funding, so we're doing another 12. So we're going on a journey with gas, but that's definitely harder and will take us up to 2030. But the electricity bit, I think we are on track to do. And the same with our fleet. So we set it out every year in February in our annual report and show kind of progress against target. So I'm fairly confident we will be there for 2025 with the 50% reduction.
Sorry, that report, will you be able to circulate that from last February around this board or to Becky afterwards? Sorry, Councillor.
Because I'm sure, considering the geopolitical situation currently with vis-a-vis energy and also the impacts of climate change, it is quite important to meet those targets. And I'm pleased we are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Almas. On that item, yeah, Councillor Taylor.
I'm just wondering with the housing building and so on. I should have asked my planning officer, but you might be the right one. Are you working with Leeds City College? Because the new people who are training as the builders, should they not reverse training the way they build in house and what put in? Are you working at Leeds City College?
I can't comment on sort of the new house building, but generally across the council, when we do schemes, we do work with the different colleges, and we're looking at how we train up people within the city and things like heat pumps or solar. So I can't speak directly for house building, but I would expect that they would do the same, and that when they're letting the contracts, they will be looking at things like apprenticeships. But yeah, it's not my direct area, but I would suspect that to be the case.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Almas?
To follow up to that, are we still looking at solar PV, or are we looking at other options as well, where it necessarily doesn't have to have sunlight and you can still get the functionality of that? I'm sure it's quite expensive compared to the solar PV, but is that in the pipeline as well to look at those, please?
We, at the moment, we're primarily looking at solar PV with the potential to have batteries at a later date, because battery technology is still quite expensive. I think last week there's been some changes to government's policy on onshore wind. So onshore wind has not been possible, not been easily possible over the last few years because of government policy, and that looks to be changing. So obviously we'll follow that up and see what that means. So obviously it's having the balance of different technologies would be ideal. But at the moment, there aren't really those options there. Hydrogen would be the other one, but that still links back to renewables in reality.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Carlyle.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, it touches on one of them, but one of the questions I had was around the probability of some of the risks, because I think there's some I'll bring out some examples, but it just help if I could understand how they're factored. So one we just touched on there was climate change as a risk, and obviously I see that's down as possible. I'm of the view probably that, well, in my view, it would be almost certain, but I'd feel a risk would be in the probable category on that for me, especially when you see the extreme weather we had, for instance, this year, that was a major risk to the city and certainly a lot of our infrastructure. And then looking at a couple of others, so for instance, in probable, we've got escalating poverty, and I'm afraid in the short term, I'd probably put that in almost certain at the moment. And then energy price increases is down there as possible, but I think that they are happening. So I just wondered whether we could touch on some of those, because some of them don't necessarily fit in with where I think they are. And I understand that it's possible that it will cause an extreme risk to the city, and maybe that's where the factor is rather than what it'll happen. But it'd be just useful if you could explain some of that through to us.
That's right. The scores for probability and impact are based on a reasonable worst case scenario. So some of the risks, you could argue that they could be higher, but because we've got controls in place to manage these risks and deal with them, that tends to bring the probability and the impact down. But as I mentioned earlier on, some of the ratings have increased since we went to executive board in July, and energy prices and the budget were certainly two of those. Climate change is an interesting one, because we know that the risk is getting worse, but as we start to put things in place to manage that risk, it's about how we sort of deal with it rather than the absolute worst case scenario. And if we rate the risks on that basis, we might be scaremongering. So we sort of adopt this: how are we dealing with it now, and how can we bring the risks down now? But I'll take those comments back, because we're updating these risks constantly, and we're due to go to corporate leadership team in early November. So I'll feed those comments back about double checking the ratings. But like I say, they're constantly being checked and reviewed. The more controls we've got in place, the more we can bring the risk ratings down. But there is a little bit of subjectivity around it, I must admit.
Thank you very much, Tim. Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Chair. I don't want to talk about climate change. Can we talk about the escalating poverty risk? Now, I think this is an area that the council are already doing lots of activity to try and mitigate. However, the risks are very much out of our control. But what interests me in everything I've read, it's geared at citizens of Leeds, isn't it? Quite rightly. But actually, council employees are citizens of Leeds. And with the cost of living crisis, it strikes me that several, and I'm being conservative, employees will also be faced with poverty and desperation. And I just wondered if there's anything in place, or if anything's going to be done to provide some support, advice, or anything for those people, for the employees. That's my first question.
Yeah, I think Andy might be helpful here.
Yes, I can. Thank you, Councillor. No, you're absolutely right. That is an issue and a concern as part of our wellbeing approach. So a few months back, we did launch our financial wellbeing toolkit and advisory video that was available for all of our staff, and also a number of our anchor institutions have also adopted it as well. And what that toolkit and advice and information provides is a whole range of very practical input and support for members of staff to try to really maximise their financial position. And we know that that's received quite a lot of positive feedback from members of staff, from our trade unions, which is really positive. In addition, to make sure that we are supporting staff who may have those types of challenges that you've rightly described, then of course we also have a range of other support mechanisms available. So as you know, we do have our employee assistance programme where individuals can contact for confidential advice and support. And that's available for every member of staff and their dependents as well. So we're confident that we do have support mechanisms in place, but obviously we just need to carefully monitor those. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. I just would perhaps like to know that when people are experiencing extreme hardship, then that can lead to a deterioration in mental health, not coming to work, escalating absence. So perhaps when there's any disciplinary or grievance procedures, perhaps that could be looked at, because it's not in isolation, is it? There's a synergy between the two. And my second question, that was me telling Granny how to suck eggs, probably. So my second question is, on the escalating poverty, there's a note about community committees and the neighbourhood networks, which I would agree with completely. Is there a plan to perhaps look at how those funds are used? Because when we have a crisis, perhaps those funds that are available need to be more targeted at the people who are in the greatest need. And it's lovely to be able to do lots of things, but when we have people who are cold and can't eat, perhaps that needs to be where the focus is for any funding. Thank you.
I can quickly come back on your first point, Councillor. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So obviously, if individuals are suffering periods of ill health and away from the workplace, obviously we will want to support with them, work with them under the absence management procedures. But you're absolutely right that we do spend a lot of time focused very much on the reasons why individuals are unwell, because as you rightly say, it may not just be physical ill health, it could certainly be other anxieties, so mental ill health, financial well-being concerns, social isolation, a whole range of factors, and we would certainly want to support those individuals and reflect very much on those whole range of different factors and explore that with the individual members of staff and their support. Thank you.
Do you want to comment on the other question, Tim? Okay.
That's right. In terms of the community funding, that's something that I'll have to contact the directorate about, find out how those funds are allocated. So I'm quite happy to do that and provide a response to you.
Thank you. So that topic is probably EHC Scrutiny Board. I think it's a really fair point, and I'm happy to ensure we make a note to Councillor Harland, who's the executive member, on that point. But it's very fair point, a very big concern, I would say.
Ordinarily, I think it's totally up to community committees and what they spend it on. But given the circumstances we're facing, I think there should be not a direct order, but a more of a steer about where it, how we can support people.
Yeah, and I think there'll be options. So I know previously we did the COVID specific funding for the community committee. Clearly, it's not my job to tell Councillor Harland what to do. Councillor Chapman, do you want to comment as well?
Yeah, just briefly. I actually manage some of those funds that come through the Household Support Fund, and actually got to be very careful. It's very difficult to support people on a utility basis. Food, fine, you can do it through the food banks. Supporting people with utility bills is really difficult, and it's not just when you say those in most need, it's knowing who is in most need, because it's not just people on benefits, and it's how do you identify those. We struggle a lot to work out if we're doing the right thing for the right people. So yeah, more guidance on that would be helpful, but we need to be careful about not being too targeted and then cutting other people out.
Yeah, and I think there's a wider question about level of council funding, but without getting into next month's debate about financial planning, I think we'll move on from that specific item. Okay, points well made there. Does anyone else want to speak on this item? No. Okay, so thank you very much both for coming. Really appreciate your time. That's a really helpful conversation, and I note that you've made a note about housing, escalating poverty, climate change, and a few other points that were made, which I'm sure Becky will have put in the minutes. So that's great. Okay, so we'll move on to item 9. So thank you very much, Polly, for coming to talk to us today. And I see we've got Sonia and here as well. So can you introduce yourself as well, both of you? And as always, assume we've read the report, but if there's anything in particular you want to draw out, please highlight that. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sonia MacDonald. I'm the Head of Shared Services with responsibility for the contact centre.
Morning, everyone. Andrew Byram. I'm the Head of Cloud and Platforms in IDS.
So I'm just going to give a very quick overview of where we're at. So we came to Scrutiny back in February. And at the point when we came then, we were really clear that actually we knew there was a lot of work to do on performance. So since then, we've seen a reduction in call waiting time for customers of about 3 minutes. We've also seen customer satisfaction starting to be regularly measured at 80%. And also customer satisfaction for wait times has actually also improved over that period. I think it's fair to say we still don't think we're at the final point of where we want to get to, but we are definitely travelling in the right direction. We've worked on 3 key areas. So operationally, the big focus has really been about recruitment. We're in a really challenging time in terms of actually being able to recruit. However, we have managed to increase the workforce by the equivalent of 23 FTEs by the end of August. I think we do need to note that that doesn't mean performance from those 23 FTEs is necessarily where it needs to be, because we've still got to go through a training programme with those staff, and obviously they take time to get fully up to speed. So there will be a slight lag until we get that full benefit from those additional staff. We've also had support from the planning forum to help us improve our longer term planning function, and also to make us really kind of much more data driven as an organisation. We have a wealth of data. Sometimes it's easy to become a bit inundated with it. So we're trying to use that in a much more focused way, and using that a lot to focus on coaching, and how we really work with staff and work when, with things like how they're dealing with difficult calls, but also on the positive, looking at the reward and recognition. So trying to make the contact centre a place where people really want to come and work and where there's a really positive environment. And then just moving on from kind of the more operational things to the transformation. So we've seen some positives. So the registrar forms have now all gone live. So in August, we saw just under 1,000 events actually being registered online. So that's calls that were avoided to the contact centre, where people were happy to do that. At the moment, we've done no promotion of those forms. So that's just naturally people going to the website and finding it easily. So there's obviously follow-up work. Now we know that's all working efficiently to actually do that and start to promote it. We also have seen a similar sort of trend with waste, where we did a lot of work about actually how do people go through the journey when they want to report things, where there wasn't clarity, where we were giving messages that were creating additional calls. And again, we've seen a good reduction in number of calls for waste. We've seen a good uptake in terms of the use of online forms. Last time we came to Scrutiny, we talked about the landlord form that we'd introduced. So Pete, we were saying to landlords they had to use the council tax, a specific form. We've now had 14,000 of those completed. Before, that process was resulting in multiple contacts where people weren't providing the right information. So it's better for the landlord and it's better for the council. And so there's some of the things that have already been achieved. We're looking to do something similar to the landlord form on adult social care, so that when different services are reporting into us, we can get much better efficiency in how they report, making it better for both parties. And then one of the big things that we're hoping will go live in October is a much greater automation of council tax, which will start to see a reduction, probably of about 10,500 calls, which again will allow us to move staff onto other lines and start to really bring down those wait times. And then just looking kind of, I suppose, longer term, we are looking at a new telephony solution. Our contract comes to an end, so we have to do that. But actually, when we look at that, we're looking to move it onto the cloud, as we're doing with a lot of the IT. And then that will give us an opportunity to bring in a much better customer relationship management system, and allow us to have a better view of the customer. Again, better for the customer, but better for us in terms of how we can deal with things more efficiently. And then the last strand is really that service liaison. So the contact centre, we've always said, is a barometer for how the council's performing. So actually strengthening that relationship with all the different services, providing feedback on what's happening with their calls has been a really key focus. And also the reflection of when we communicate with customers, when we proactively communicate, and we've heard a bit about it this morning with elections, if we get that messaging wrong, the contact centre is the one that receives those calls. So actually there's been more focus about starting to look at those mass mail outs, getting corporate comms colleagues involved, making sure the kind of level of English we're using is as clear as it can be. I think one thing just to say to underpin all of this, with all the will in the world, things change very quickly in the contact centre environment, and we can plan. So we can plan for things like the council tax peaks that we see every year, year in, year out, and we should plan for those, and school emissions and things like that. But things like, for example, the council tax rebate, that was something that came quite late in the day, the £150, and we have to deal with that. We don't suddenly have a kind of magic pool of staff. That does impact on service. Things like now, we're starting to see a massive increase in sort of welfare demand calls. Those calls are more complex, they're taking longer. So sometimes just looking at call volumes as well doesn't really give the whole picture, because actually if where those calls are coming from start to change, it obviously can change the handling times, it can change the pool of staff that we have. Not every staff can deal with every call. So the contact centre does have to be quite flexible. So I think it's just worth setting that context of, we've got a journey, we know what we're doing, we're planning, but there will always be these things that come from nowhere that we also have to be able to react to. So that's just a summary really of the last 6 or 7 months.
Okay, thank you very much, Polly. I just think it's worth just talking about the history. So obviously you came like last year, and then you came in February, and you're here again today. And I want to put on record that, so I appreciate the honesty you've given to the board, so recognising that we weren't where we wanted to be in an improvement journey. And I think it's important to recognise that it is a moving feast. So thanks to you and the team. I also think it's quite interesting, just thinking back to the last item, what you said about welfare demand and how we was talking about escalating poverty. And I think it's important to make sure we're all talking to each other, and that sort of information that you're getting on the front line, as it were, gets fed back to those of us who sit more in the centre, as it were, the hub, where we're less on the coalface. So with those comments, I'm going to start with Councillor Flynn.
Thanks. It's not really for you, this one, but it's interesting you mentioned the adult social care. I had a report from a couple of members of the public about someone who was possibly at risk themselves and various other things. So I rang, I asked one of the staff in the office to ring adult social care, and they were told you have to ring the contact centre. When I rang one of the deputy directors, I was told similarly to ring the contact centre. I didn't have the requisite information to actually pass on to them, and I just wonder at the logic. It's not for you, just making a point. The logic of asking members of the public to ring up a contact centre who won't have the requisite knowledge anyway, other than to direct it to where it should be directed to. And what actually happens if people are kept waiting 5-10 minutes on the phone, and in the end they basically give up. It's a comment. It's got nothing to do with the call centre in itself, but strikes me as being a rather strange policy decision to put those things through to a contact centre.
So I suppose one thing, adult social care is treated as a high priority line, so it should be answered within 2 minutes for the exact reason, because of the sensitivity. The staff are well trained, so they go through a much more detailed programme. So staff are specialised in certain areas, and those that have adult social care or children's social care will be trained to a much greater extent. They capture the information, they have that relationship with the back office, and so I suppose ultimately it's making more efficient use of the adult social care social workers, that they're not having to go through all that process, but it does work as a means, and it should be an effective way. And if there are, I suppose, instances where that's not working, then we need to look at it. I don't know, Sonia, whether you want to comment further.
Thanks, Polly. No, I think that you've covered all of that. I do think that the feedback that we get, particularly on the adult social care line, is very good. the staff are trained to deal with the sort of contact that comes in and know what questions to ask. And they do have that relationship with the back office. But if there are any concerns, please send them through to me, and I'll make sure that they're looked into.
I understand that when you get through, you might well sort of be handled pretty well and all the rest of it. It just seems a strange way of dealing with a potential safeguarding sort of issue. Have you any way of knowing what the waiting time is for this kind of? I mean, you presumably can't pick out when the calls are coming in what they're for, and if somebody's waiting for a long time, chances are they may just give up and not bother.
So we can monitor the waiting time for every single solitary line. So because people either ring a different number or they use the push buttons to get through, so you can literally break down and work out the adult social care. So that's how we know that we are hitting the 2-minute wait time for that. So
human being at the end of it, isn't
it? No. So there is a human being at the end of it that answers it, because like you say, anything that's safeguarding is absolutely critical, which is why. So I think it's registrars when it's focused on sort of deaths, adult social care and children's social care are the lines that will always get priority because of what they're dealing with, which is you try it.
Polly, could you circulate a similar chart to this for adult social care? Because I think that'd be really helpful for the board to understand how different it is in terms of visually seeing that, if that's okay. I mean, it might reassure Councillor Flynn, it might not, but hopefully it will. Okay, Councillor Richards.
Thank you very much. Risk of showing my ignorance once more in this circumstance. The chart shows quite rightly that there has been a decrease in the waiting times, which is great and shows, whatever you're doing is working. It also shows at the bottom, the grey area is about emails. Yes. So my understanding would be that in most circumstances and organisations now, there's kind of a drive towards using email and contact in preference to phone calls because of various reasons. And that doesn't seem to be increasing. I wondered what the position is on that, whether there is going to be a drive to actually increase the number of emails rather than phone calls.
So I don't think we'd want to increase the number of emails, but you're right in terms of digital contact. Emails can actually be quite inefficient because people email, they don't give you the right information. So you end up with the back and forth, which is why we've introduced things like the landlord form, because it means that people are coming in with all the information, it gets processed and you don't have this kind of back and forth that we were having. So actually emails aren't necessarily the most efficient way. What is more efficient is when actually we've got online forms. So things like the waste online forms, the registrar ones that I referenced earlier. So people put in the information and they actually book their appointment so they get an outcome straight away. So that's where we're driving to. So I don't know, Andrew, if you want to say any more about the sort of digital journey side.
Yeah, thanks, Polly. It's about getting structured content. So as Polly said, it's getting to the actual point of why the person's contacting us. The danger with email is there's no context in there. So other things we're doing around the forms, things we're doing around the chatbot is to push people to a specific point. It's much more efficient for us to handle. I can see Councillor Flynn.
Councillor Richard, do you want to come back?
To come back on that, because I totally understand that, move towards that, because better connectivity, as we keep saying, is the way forward. My concern, and it is raised by residents, is the fact that they would love to use that, but the response time isn't necessarily as quick as they would wish. And that then forces the issue of the other ones, which is why you don't see the increase proportionately of usage in that way. And it's interesting, it's not just coming from residents. What we see is that officers in certain departments know that it takes longer for it to go to the call centre and then come back to them. And you mentioned waste. And that's one of the particular ones where we find that the operatives themselves aren't getting the information as quickly and cannot respond as quickly. And therefore that then causes them operational difficulties. Understandable, because then by the time they've found this out, the wagon has already gone back and therefore they're not in a position to retrieve. I just, I'm pleased to hear that there is going to be further work on this because, people will not use the system unless they're confident it will work. So what they do then, of course, is they email me and then I go around that way. And it's proven that the operatives themselves prefer it at the moment, because at the moment they're getting better information more quickly from me, Queen of the Bins, and than it is through the system. So I'm just wondering how we can make that better in that way.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Richards. I hope that name doesn't stick for you. For what it's worth, we've raised the issue of forms coming back at previous board meetings because I agree that's a really important question. I'll pass back to Polly.
So I think if we take the registrar's example, that's the ideal way for a form to work, because basically the customer actually gets what they were contacting for then and there. So they make their appointment, they get the date, they get the time, they get the certificate, whatever it is they come on to, they get the outcome. And I think some of the sort of earlier forms that were created were more an input in, and then we need to integrate with the back office system so you can get that same feedback. It will take time, in all honesty. We have got such a quantity of legacy systems, some of which aren't that easy to integrate with. What we have tried to do with waste, so when we went through the research and did the user journey, there was actually some sort of misinformation. So it would say things like, somebody will get back in touch with you in 2 days. Well, that was never happening, was never going to happen with the quantity. So actually we've changed the messaging. So actually what they get told as a member of the public is accurate. So, and it tells them about leaving out their bin. It tells them, if they leave, if their bin doesn't get collected, they can leave additional bags. So we've tried to get it to the point where we are being really honest with the public about what will happen, and it then prevents that additional call cycle. It's really difficult to do what you're saying in terms of, get that message directly to the operative on the wagon. I don't think we're there. I'm not sure whether we will get there, but we are trying to make that process much quicker and slicker, and just be much more transparent, which I think is then stops that call, that secondary call. So, and that is why we've seen the reduction, I think, in waste calls.
Yeah, and just to add to what Polly and Sonia and the team have said about that, I think the issue really is about moving to more digital access for residents, and not necessarily email, because email's not instant. There isn't somebody sat there waiting for an email to ping so that they can then answer it. It has to then go into the inbox of the administration and be then dealt with in that way. Whereas if we move, and I don't, please keep calm, Councillor Flynn, but if we move to more digital robotics and an AI in terms of responding on the web and being able to self-serve if you can. I'm not on about closing channels down if that is not a route that you want to take, and you can actually take other routes as well, but to have that as an option for other people that can go directly to that would be useful. It'd be certainly useful, I think, sometimes as a ward councillor, when people contact us, as Councillor Richards has said, that maybe then I could go on it and do the work, if other people can't. But, as opposed to sending emails and then trying to ring officers yourself and deal with it in that way. I think there are a myriad of options in front of us about the transformation that's ongoing with contact with the council and how we're able to do it, including the artificial intelligence that we have around all our devices in our homes, and not just limiting it to your laptop and or your telephone. I think it would be really good.
Thanks, Debbie. I know the systems we've got are ancient, a bit like myself. But what terrifies me, this mention of robots, because by definition, it's a robot. And if you ever check the council website, online and stuff, I know what I'm looking for, and quite often I can't find it. God knows how the average member of the public does it. There's nothing more annoying when you try to chat, live chat, and some tosspot comes on called Mickey or Arthur or whatever, and hasn't got a clue what you're talking about, and eventually you disappear. Well, you eventually disappear somewhere. It just drives me up the wall. What I want to be absolutely certain of, that whatever systems we introduce, there's a human being at some stage in the system that can answer what you've rung up about, and that, you know, and I'm not confident.
Come back on Councillor Richards can come back, but hopefully for that term you can make a donation to Lord Mayor's charity, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Richards.
Thank you for that. I've seen another side of Councillor Flynn this morning. Yeah, I take your points entirely. I agree with you. I don't think email is necessarily the best way forward in there. It is, I'm going to say it again, about connectivity, because all that happens with me doing that is that I do that. And I'm very fortunate in the team leaders that work in my area, because they do respond, because they know I only put through things which are appropriate and relevant and immediate. And that tends to work. So in other words, I'm doing what the system should be doing, which is making that connection, because all that has to happen in my little head, and I'm not an IT person, but is that online form should go straight to the operatives who are working in that area. And if they are working in that area and a resident in one place tells them that, then they're in the area and in a position to do something about it, or at least contact their team leader to say, this is how we do it. And that's all that's needed, really, isn't it? You are right. It is a journey. It is a digital one, and hopefully not one that will impact too much on us in that way, but actually make it better. But I think, again, you will not get people using those forms unless they get response. And I agree with you about managing expectations too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Richards. I'll take that last one as a comment, if that's all right. I think it's a fair comment. Okay. Bring in Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. Just to pick up on some of the discussion so far, I hope there is, you know, around email, there's a distinction between an email from an elected member versus an email from a member of the public, because I'd expect members' emails to be picked up and dealt with. And for example, adult social care, Councillor Flynn, we've got a duty inbox which I'd use, and I find that's really efficient actually for reporting things rather than ringing a call centre. So on to the things I was going to talk about. Again, it ties into something Councillor Flynn said about the website. I get comments that it's very difficult to find the appropriate telephone number. Now, I totally understand that we're looking to encourage the use of digital. However, some people do prefer that telephone number. And I agree with them. When I've looked, you think, well, they're right. There's not a telephone number for this department. So perhaps that's something we can look at, or perhaps that is a deliberate strategy. Just a couple of other things. I think it's page 53. We've talked about staffing levels, just conscious through the last report, exec board, about a recruitment fee freeze. Is that will that be affecting the call centre, or is that deemed as one of the exceptions for operational things? And then again, I think it's tying into Councillor Richards, particularly on bins. I think people do lose confidence when they come to us as members when they said they've reported it twice and it still hasn't been done. And I have asked my local team leaders and the exec member for some statistics on how many unresolved collections that are done, because I think she's right that the confidence is undermined and it becomes a workload for us. There should be a reason why, if they're not collected, why they're not communicated to people. Thank you.
So just, I suppose, working through the different questions. So in terms of the telephone number, we aren't trying to make it so prominent, because if people are going on the website and they've got the capability to do that, then obviously we're keen that they do use alternative methods. However, we haven't got to the level of Amazon where you need a degree in computer science to find it. So it's meant to be a kind of midpoint, but I don't think there's an intention to make it easier, because actually, you know, some of the ways, literally you ring a customer service up, they will literally do the same thing as you do on the internet. They will not have access to any additional information. So you're not adding any more value than if the person were to do it themselves. But obviously we are conscious of people who don't have those digital skills, and, you know, the face-to-face side of it as well will still be available. In terms of recruitment freeze, I think we've probably got to where we want to get to in terms of staffing. I think if you also just think about what we said earlier about the council tax scheme, we think that will free up about 5 FTEs. So in terms of sort of staff leaving and things, that gives us a bit of flexibility as well. So we'll, I suppose, take it and have a look at it as it comes. I think we've been really clear that actually the contact centre is one of our key priorities, because it is central to the whole functioning of the council. It's not just one central function, it's helping everything to work well. So we'd have to take a decision at the time, but I don't think we'll be rushing to keep increasing figures, because I think we are where we need to be now. And yeah, the last one's difficult because it's obviously related more, I suppose, to the bin service. We do work with them closely, like I said, about the service liaison, and looking at the issues and drawing out kind of common issues and working with that service. But I suppose fundamentally the contact centre won't resolve that. I don't know, Sonia, if there's anything you want to add from a waste. There's not, I don't think there probably is much more to say, is there?
No, nothing more to add on the waste side of things, but just want to use the opportunity just to respond further to Councillor Richards' point around the email side of things. You referenced the council tax automation project. That's going to have a very big impact on the contact centre, because we get a lot of emails about council tax, and that project will deal with about a dozen different topics. So that connectivity that Councillor Richards was talking about there will be much improved when that lands.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, can I just add also about Councillor Rich's comment about councillor emails being dealt with in a different way. I think that in terms of councillor emails, we have dedicated inboxes to send to on all the different services. So if you feel that may need refreshing for all councillors, then maybe that's something we could do as well, because all services should have those dedicated inboxes.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Just on Councillor Ritchie's point about the number of staff, I think it the recruitment fees, I think it'd be the view of this board, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, that I think the number of people in the call centre is a priority, and because of attrition, people leaving, I think it's important to keep a really strong focus on that, and we feel like it needs to be there. Councillor Ritchie, do you want to go back on any of your questions? Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Almas.
Yeah, thank you. I think, excuse me, part of what I wanted to ask was covered by Councillor Richards and Councillor Cooper anyway, but I'll just go back to that artificial intelligence and whatever. I think it's really important. We've moved a long way from PCs and laptops and tablets and now onto mobile phones. I think an app, and we've talked about it before as well a few years ago, I think a user-friendly app would be really, really helpful in terms of, and also getting help of the artificial intelligence as well, because it can actually help you signpost to specific departments and whatever. I think, you know, looking at some of the examples, for example, you know, engaging with the police, for example, 101 service and stuff like that. Because with this, part of the complaints that I'm getting sometimes is from people who have been in touch with, for example, you know, reporting the noise or antisocial behavior and stuff like that, and they can't find any records of those calls. But the good thing about these online chats is that you can actually obtain your transcript and so on as well. So it's just making it more user friendly for people, because lots and lots of people are using phones rather than their computers and so on. So what sort of work are we doing in terms of investing into new apps, more user-friendly apps, and also artificial intelligence? I'd greatly welcome.
So I think everything we do now, and Andrew will be much better placed to answer this, is suitable for phones. So I don't think we do anything that can't work on all mechanisms, but I'll let Andrew come in with more detail.
Yeah, I am actually in training this morning on Powerapps, which is part of the Microsoft licensing stack. So we are looking to start deploying apps at pace. And as part of the procurement of the new phone system built into that procurement, which will be a cloud system, we are looking at, how you render that on a mobile phone and how you'd be able to make that much more user-friendly. There's AI built into it, or will be built into it when we select a product. So we're absolutely moving at pace on that.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Chapman.
I'm sure the answer to this is yes, but do we have the mechanisms to check how many of these forms are being completed by a user, and then how quickly it takes to resolve them? So do we have a time thing that says, I don't know, say I reported something today and for some reason it didn't get fixed immediately. Would we 3 months down the line be able to see a time banding to say how long my ask has been sitting in the system? So basically this sort of report, are we going to get it for the online forms in terms of customer satisfaction?
So I think we would have to look at it with each service, because when the forms are done, so for example, they would go to the, not picking on waste, but they go to the waste service and they complete them. So it's not something that is sort of built into the process at the minute, and it's all this linked back to the legacy system. So whereas registrars is a complete contrast, where it's all done within because it's been designed recently, it's modern, it's up to date. Whereas something like the waste, we've got the waste system where all the bin routes are and things, and it has to link back to. You can't get that automatic update, so you'd have to go back to the waste service, and they would have to provide that update, and that would be true, I think, on probably a lot of the forms. So it's the more modern ones that are coming through, we're doing it so that you raise the form, you get your outcome, and so you get an automatic close down then and there, whereas some of the older ones, I think that's not the case, so it's harder to do that reporting. I don't know, Sonia or Andrew, if you want to add any more on that.
The only thing I'd just add, Polly, is that with the council tax automation project, this level of detail will be available. We will be able to report how many forms have been completed for direct debit, for example, all of the different areas. So yeah, we can give assurance on that project.
Thank you. I think it's just about, some of this is about customer satisfaction being in 80%. If we can't track people's customer satisfaction through an online communication, then how do we know that we're doing it as well as our residents want us to do it? Do you see what I mean? It's we might think they've come in on waste, and I understand there's the legacy systems and it might take a long time to get there, but someone's reported a waste problem, they haven't got an immediate resolution because you can't immediately get the van to, the truck to go back out and empty the bin that's been missed. So how do we know that they are happy with the resolution that they got?
It's not an ideal answer, but I think you'd have to look at waste performance in terms of, number of bins emptied, number of bins missed, and that would be your indicator of customer satisfaction with the waste service and how that's comparing year on year, rather than necessarily individual resolution. I think waste, I can't speak for waste, obviously we deal with lots of different services, but I suspect that waste will monitor the number of forms coming in and how they're resolved. But I can't promise that. I'd have to go back and double check with the service and feed back to you. And obviously that's only one service out of lots of them that are having the same challenges.
Okay, thanks. It's just a general, if we're moving more down the online route, is how do we track that? I think just a general comment really, but thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, and I think it might be something you need to take away, Polly, in terms of future reporting. And I note your point about the more recent ones, and I think there's a challenge from the board to say we need to make sure that all new forms are trackable and we can get some data. And I guess in terms of the customer satisfaction, often you're putting an email or something like that in your form. It'd be easy to send a similar little form just to say we're happy with the service on it, just like you do on your at the end of your telephone. Or lots of people on your, if you put your phone number in, you might get a text message saying were you happy with today's service, which is what other people do. So I think that's a fair point. Just one other question from me is, I guess a lot of what we're doing is really requires IDS input, so the computer team's input. And so is it just a question of, do you believe that they're giving this enough focus and enough resource on this topic? And I know it's a big topic and lots of projects, but is it moving at the pace that you want to see it?
We've got Leonardo as the Chief Digital Officer, sits on the board, and we're working, as a project team. It all falls within the Director of Resources remit, which was one of the reasons that it was moved, in order to get that focus from IDS. So yes, I think what would be the answer to that question.
Can I just add to that, as the exec board member for resources, and digital services also comes under my portfolio, so I'm well aware of the priority that the contact centre is given through IDS, and I'd like to just reassure the board that will remain as well.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Good. I think we've had a really good debate, and I think everyone who's wanted to talk has had the chance to. So thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it. It's been really helpful. And again, I thank you for the progress you and the team have made over the last few months, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. Okay, so we're going to move on to item 10 now, which is the work programme. Are there any comments? I think I'll start with Councillor Chapman, because she made a comment in the pre-meeting. If you want to raise that, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, so I was looking at the November meeting, which is particularly heavy when you think we've got financial health monitoring and the medium-term financial strategy. And the last 2 or 3 times we've done this, we've massively overrun the meeting, and we haven't probably not done justice to the other agenda items as a result. If we can't move either the shared prosperity fund, and I understand you've explained that that's because it's going to the exec board after it's come to us, and Leeds 2023 can't come any earlier, then is there a way of combining the financial health monitoring and the medium-term financial strategy, so it's not 2 separate papers, it's all in one? Because actually it's the same conversation, it's just a different time period, and the focus is much more on this year and next year than the year 2 and 3, if we're honest about it.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, as I said in pre-meeting, obviously there's been, I wanted one of those items in November in this meeting, so we could have discussed it now, but I'll definitely talk to Richard Ellis and Victoria about whether we can group those two together. I think financial health is intrinsically linked to your medium plan, because if you haven't got good health now, you can't have a good medium-term plan either. So thanks for that, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Flynn.
It's linked actually to what Diane's just said. Absolutely no problem at all about linking the two. But will it be a look at the October Executive Board paper, or a look at the at sort of future things, in the sense that all business as usual and service review savings should now be going to all of the scrutiny boards, basically. And while there won't be that many, I would think in the current year, because we're still indicating a balanced budget, even though I think there's a £12 million gap being identified over the medium term one. That's a 5-year period now, and we're talking about 180 odd million pound gap. I think we need to see the BAU and service review savings by directorate as part of the papers for this particular meeting. And I noticed in the latest executive board meetings, they've got yet another heading, which is efficiency savings. I don't know what they are, but whatever they are, I'd like to know. Okay, as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just I guess just in terms of there's two things going on. So I guess one's the budget thing, one's the current health, and the third is the medium term. In terms of the I guess in terms of efficiency savings, that's I can't comment on that. I would also be interested to know exactly what's in there. I think that's relevant for us to scrutinise. Medium, the financial. I know we're behind the budget as well. My understanding is that the finance team would like to do a sort of a subgroup or a non-formal meeting in December with a lot of the proposals, which I think is trying to fit more in. Becky just wanted to comment as well on what exactly is coming.
Yeah, specifically on the budget, each of the scrutiny boards is going to be offered one, potentially two separate working groups to look at the BA business usual savings and the service review proposals. As we've done in previous years, the timing will slightly depend on whether those proposals come through the October Executive Board, November Executive Board or December Executive Board, but we're looking at provisional dates now, and you should be getting a diary hold in the next couple of weeks to hold that time separately for a detailed discussion on the budget, which will then feed through to your public meeting in January, where you'll have the initial budget proposals as agreed by Executive Board in December, and that again feeds into the statement from the scrutiny boards that goes to the budget meeting in February.
Well, the BAUs and the service reviews, because where the impact on children and families, and particularly adults, social care and stuff. There's been a lot of stuff, a lot of the savings plans brought in by adult social care I wasn't very happy about. And we only find out about it after the event, really, what the effects were going to be. So it's just prior knowledge of them that I'd like to have.
Yeah, I totally sympathise with you. And during the last process, I fed back that as a scrutiny chair, I felt like we didn't get our information early enough for our meetings, and I thought that's a problem. I guess specifically on the adults and the children's, obviously they've got their own scrutiny boards to discuss those points. But I'm in the chair's brief. So we had a scrutiny chairs meeting where we met with Victoria and her team, and we made the point that we need the detail, and we need it ahead of the meeting so we can analyse it rather than. I think last time we got some of the data sort of in the meeting, which doesn't help full absorption and debate in that sense. But yeah, I accept that point. Thanks, Billy. Any other comments on the work programme? No? Okay, super. So thank you everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. As always, if there's anything you want to raise with me outside the meeting, very happy for you to do that. And so I'll formally close the meeting now.